All right. So, thanks everyone for taking your Saturday and spending a little bit of time with me here and with everyone else for this presentation. Um, Before I start, I'll start off with a little story, and it's basically how I got here. A few years ago, maybe three or four, um, I would typically use to scan my home network. I don't know if any of you guys. I'm sure some of you may do that, but I'm in usually a habit of just every once in a while doing a home scan of my network and just making sure nothing nothing random shows up. And sure enough, one time something random showed up, and I was like, "Oh, that's odd." Like, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on what's on my network, and it's nothing crazy. It's a home network, but you'd be surprised at how quickly things kind of add up it, with smart devices, things you get IPs, things you just forget about, just all these little things. So, the list could, you could be in the 20s before you realize it. But anyway, so I felt like I had a pretty good handle, and, I had most things kind of tagged and labeled. And so when something new shows up, it's kind of obvious. And I wasn't really, scared. I wasn't really like on uneasy. I was more of just like hey, I want, like, what is that? Like I really didn't think it was anything malicious or a bad actor or someone had gotten in. It was just more just like, oh, like, what device, like what have I forgotten about? So after a few hours of digging and doing a few other things, I found out that it was Samsung, and I'm like, oh, that's my TV. And so normally when I do scans, it's like super late at night, nothing's on, I'm just by myself, lights off, just running a scan and just messing around on the internet, and nothing's on. So this particular evening, the TV was on. I wasn't even paying attention. I didn't even think about it. The TV was on, and it got picked up as it should. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. There's a few little interesting ports that I saw there. So, like, well, that's even more interesting. Like, I wonder what this thing is doing. And this was years ago. So I never really thought much of it. I did do some digging, and we'll get into that. So I immediately was like, well, I don't. I'm not using the Wi-Fi on that TV. It's connected through another device that is hardwired. So I'm like, well, let me just disable it. And it turns out like wasn't a way to disable it. I actually had to put in an address that didn't work or wouldn't go anywhere. So that was a little frustrating, but nonetheless, I've finally figured out a way to kind of shut it up, and then you kind of went about my business. But I still went online, and I started digging around some stuff. So that's kind of where we'll begin the presentation. So is your TV watching you? Um, and I would say yes, it is, both literally, or the possibility, and figuratively, probably, um, the latter for sure. 100%, it is definitely listening to you or watching you in some way, shape, or form. So I went online, started doing some digging, and came across a WikiLeak, Vault 7, and this was back in 2017. And it turned out that there was a WikiLeak, thousands of pages published, all these CIA programs and tools that were being built. And a few things that caught my eyes was smart TVs, cars. That's pretty interesting. OSs. I don't know. There's a lot of things that when I saw this, I'm like, a few like very little things surprised me. The TV was kind of interesting. Everything else I just kind of assumed. Like, I assumed that our browser, like, the CIA can get into my computer or my phone, or any like social platform if I'm on one. I just as sad as it is, I just figure that they can get to that, whether they leverage the provider or they just have some backdoor. But I saw TV, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty interesting. Like, I wonder what this is all about. So a little bit more digging, and you come across Weeping Angel, and this was in the Vault 7 leak. And if you look up Vault 7, actually, let me post in the chat. I will post. Let me move this thing. I will post a link to the wiki here. This should go out to everyone in the chat. But so some of this is literally verbatim from the wiki page, both from Wikipedia and the WikiLeaks. But so it turns out one of the projects in Vault 7 is a Weeping Angel, and sure enough, there's an exploit of certain Samsung TVs that are done in such a way that the video and the audio can be recorded. and either stored on the asset, the TV, or sent over the internet back to the CIA or whatever branch or whatever wherever they are, that information. And further investigating, it seemed as though it was a very specific targeted. I hate to use the word attack, but I'm not even sure operation. I couldn't find certain articles. I don't know. I don't want to claim conspiracy theory, but there was articles that I found originally a few years back that I can't seem to find now, and some of it was talking about how it seemed very specific and even regional about where these TVs were being distributed, like where they were being distributed. So I don't know if there was a specific target in mind when this was happening, or when this project was being written. I really don't think it was meant for like some kind of global surveillance. I really do think it was mostly meant for a specific target. And from what I read, it seemed they were after a dictator or someone somewhere, that it was like, again, like a specific deployment of this. So anyway, so it turned out there was a legitimate, although I haven't seen a POC of this in the wild. I haven't seen no proof of concept. So technically this is all just still rumors. Who knows? I know that there's plenty of clips on YouTube. There's some actual news footage of some of this stuff being covered or uncovered, but it seemed to kind of, I don't think it got the publicity that it probably should have, and I don't know if that's just because no one cared, or if there was some sort of other entity that kind of trying to hush this being broadcasted. I know that there was some pushback saying, oh, anytime things are like this or are leaked, then now our enemies have that. But I don't know. My take, without getting too political, is that if our CIA has this, granted, I love to give our team props, but I feel like we're probably not the only ones to do this or have this. So yes, I do feel like we shouldn't be telling the world like certain things maybe that we have that we can do. But at the same time, I feel like I don't know that we're that special and that amazing that we're the only ones that did this or could do this, or anyway. So, but again, if you do a little bit of research, you'll find that there are some articles and some what seem to be some news coverage, especially regarding the Samsung and a few issues around that. They've been kind of in the paper quite a bit for issues. So nonetheless, so obviously, again, there's some criteria that has to be made. I'll also post, I believe, what I guess you could call it maybe engineering notes. I'll paste that in the channel. Some specific things, criteria for, I guess, for this to work. Now, this was years ago, so maybe this thing was mothballed, maybe it's no longer in use, maybe it never happened. I don't know. Supposedly it did. Supposedly it was F-series Samsung smart TVs. F-series is mostly what I would say businesses would use. They're the TVs with the built-in camera, the built-in microphone, typically for some sort of conferencing. So again, that would be a great place to put a bug, obviously. Yes, it was open to consumers, but I feel like, and from what I read originally, it was mostly a series of TVs that was like bought like in more commercial use. I don't know if that was part of the target, probably, but nonetheless, that's just to give you an idea. It's a specific series of Samsung smart TVs that have a built-in webcam and a built-in microphone. So supposedly the only way this thing was to work, again, this was back then. I have a suspicion now that this has been probably tweaked and you don't necessarily need on-prem access, but apparently you would need to upload a version of the firmware that sort of, you could call it shells the TV, but basically does what enables the things that we're reading here. So the first thing it does is that when you turn the TV off, it's not really off. So one telltale, supposedly, is that typically the Samsungs have a red LED when the TV is off. Technically, it's not off, it's in standby mode. If it was off, your remote wouldn't work when you turn it off. But anyway, so in standby, off, whatever you want to call it, typically it's a red LED, it's blue instead. That was one way to tell if your TV had been hacked. Obviously, it allowed for the recording of audio, the recording of video, and because of this, there was on-prem storage, or there was storage on the asset. I'm not sure what that form was, but there was storage, obviously. So I'm not sure if, depending on the compression ratio, you could probably store up to hours of audio, or audio and video. I guess it depends what you were actually tracking. Supposedly anything past 1118 um, would circumvent, or I would say would write over the sort of hacked firmware. So anything newer than that, which again, this was years ago, so I'm positive they have newer firmware versions. And then also there was talk, again, articles that I can't find now, but there was also talk about the ability to steal Wi-Fi credentials. Because if you think about it, you do enter them into your TV, right? If you are using a Wi-Fi connection, if it's not over a physical LAN connection, in order for it to get online, you have to get it onto your network. In order to do that, you have to put in a username and password. So obviously that's stored somewhere in some form, hash, whatever. So yeah, so all this is there. So I'm doing this research, and I'm like not freaking out, but I'm kind of like, wow, this is really interesting, and it's kind of terrifying because I have a Samsung TV, but I know that I don't have a webcam or anything like that. So the first thing I started doing is just like a checklist in my mind. I'm like, okay, only affects F series. Well, all right, I don't have that. But I do have USB. Like there's USB ports on this, so I'm assuming I could upload something to address or to upload a different version of the firmware. Thankfully, though, when I turn it off or put it in standby mode, it's a red LED, not blue. So that's good. Well, and since I don't really have a microphone and a camera, I can pretty much check off or X off the ability to record audio and video. And since I can't record that, I'm pretty sure there's no storage. I don't know 100%. I don't know if there's storage on my TV or not, but I'm assuming if there's no recording capabilities, I don't know why there would just be storage laying around. I can confirm that I do have the newer version of firmware, 12 based, but there's still obviously the possibility for my credentials to be stolen, because I am entering them into the TV. So it does have them somewhere in some shape or form. So to kind of step back, I'm like, okay, well, I found these ports just on a random scan, and it wasn't even intentional. Got me curious, started looking around, found this Vault 7 thing, was like, wow, that's even more interesting. There's literally a specific, program for, surveillance through TVs. And then, I'm looking around, and then thankfully mine doesn't meet that. But again, in what I was digging around, I didn't think it would have been anyway, but it was still just a fun little kind of rabbit hole to go down, the what if and what's, kind of what's going on. So I kind of put that to bed. Like I said, I locked it up. I found a way to kind of get it off the network in a sense. The Wi-Fi has been disabled. But since then, I have purchased another Samsung TV, which is in the office. And obviously immediately the Wi-Fi was disabled. I didn't have it connected to it. I had it connected to an external box that was feeding things into it. And so, again, I felt pretty comfortable about that. I could scan it. It would never show up. But, again, things just in the news and just, boredom, lockdown. I'm like, hey, you know what? I wonder what Samsung's been up to lately. Like, I wonder, what these TVs are doing these days. So turned on the Wi-Fi, ran an map scan, and I was actually pretty blown away at 15 services. My my laptop, my daily driver does not have 15. I mean, I don't have any any computer in my home that idles with 15 services running. So I was like, wow, that's that's pretty interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on with just this, little TV sitting here. And again, it is over Wi-Fi. So, I'm just kind of doing some recon of what I have immediately available. I mean, there's a lot of things I could do. I may still do, but just from what I have around me with the way my current network is set up, how I can kind of capture certain things, I was just like, hey, how far can I go with this without spending too much crazy time? I mean, this is all done pretty much this past week. For some of the stuff that I've been doing recently with it. So I went in a map scan. I immediately, I start kind of taking notes, doing some enumeration. I use Cherry Tree. So all of these services are in Cherry Tree, and then each service, each thing that I attempt to do, I jot down. That's kind of my workflow. Literally every port, everything that I do for every port. I kind of have a go-to system of things that I try just across the board for everything. Obviously, some of these things are app related, which typically draws my attention. So anything running what appears to be a web server is kind of where I'm going to gravitate towards first. That's more in my wheelhouse. So obviously with that, there's certain things. But the good thing is about having certain things on my network like Pi-hole, it gives me more insight. And real quick, for those of you, I'm going to do a shameless plug here. Not that I have anything to do with this organization, but I think Pi-hole itself is a pretty awesome project to do with a Raspberry Pi. This is a Raspberry Pi 4. And essentially Pi-hole is a ad blocker, is kind of what it's sold as. And it's kind of at the DNS level. So it kind of, all DNS queries, if it's set up correctly, pass through the Raspberry Pi running Pi-hole. And then Pi-hole has a blacklist, if you will, of what it deems acceptable or not. And obviously you can customize that, but nonetheless, it's kind of, again, sold as like a black hole for ads. But with that, since all DNS queries are passing through this, you kind of have a really good idea of what things are on your network and what they're doing, like how chatty they are, where they're reaching out to. A quick little diagram of kind of like what it looks like. Again, all DNS queries go through it. Internet traffic is still, everything's still going through your router, but just DNS happens to pass through this first. So again, I already have that set up. So that gives me kind of another rabbit hole, another avenue to kind of just check, like, okay, I ran Nmap, I found a bunch of services. I can start doing lots of manual, testing over these ports. But going back to Pi-hole, it gives you, again, a lot of insight. So right off the bat, just the basic install gives you all a block list, and it gives you graphs, and it'll tell you like who's most chatty, who's reaching out to what and where and when and all this stuff. So for this particular, I guess, experiment, if you will, I maybe had the TV on for maybe like the majority of a day. Not quite like, when I took this snapshot that you're about to see. So it wasn't on that long while I was kind of going over these things, and when I took the snapshot, and I was actually really surprised. So I'm like, okay, I have all these logs. Let's see, who's my TV talking to? And I was really surprised at, and this is just a few, but there's 70 unique addresses that my TV is reaching out to. Not requests. We're talking almost 2,500 requests in just a matter of hours, but just unique addresses, and these are some of them. So I was floored when I was like, I didn't expect the TV to be quite so nosy about what it's reporting and to where and to who and gathering all this information. I think most of us have a feeling like, oh yeah, Facebook is gathering this from me, or Twitter, or my computer and Google, because I use these things and we just know about them. I don't know. The TV has been off my radar, and shame on me for thinking that. But I was really surprised when I dug into this, and just right off the bat, I'm just like, whoa. Clearly, they're an Amazon company, right? And clearly, there's going to be some things are going to make sense, right? So they're, it's TV. It has platforms. It's hosting stuff, right? It's it's streaming stuff. So obviously, it makes sense for some of these things to exist. But with that said, I think there's probably obviously other things going on under the hood than just using Amazon S3 for media storage. I'm sure there's lots of other things they're doing with that. But yeah, it's very interesting to see some things up here, things that I've never even heard of. I didn't even know. I never knew Woot was a thing from Amazon. Never heard of it. Voodoo, never heard of that. Apparently that's a Walmart, but then they got bought out by Fandango or something like that. So I don't know. It's very interesting, but these are some of the kind of the more popular, I would say popular-ish names. So I figured I'd pull them up, and there was a lot of them though. Again, there's literally 70 different addresses, and I actually have a detailed list here. Apparently I'm not the only one that was very curious about this, and I started making a list, and I have a list, and then after doing some research, I found that there's other lists. I'll post one here. Other people have posted lists of what their Samsung TV has been doing, and I want to kind of address that. I don't think that this is just a Samsung thing. I think it'd be kind of naive to just assume that Samsung is the only smart TV out there collecting data or reaching out to all these places. It just so happens that's just the TVs that I have on hand. I do have a few friends that have different TVs, and I've kind of set them up to the challenge, and hopefully we'll get some feedback on that. But if you look at the list that I posted in the chat, that's a GitHub list. There's actually been a few iterations where they've talked about like what it's doing and what they're for. So if you have any TVs on that list, you could probably rest assured that some of those things your TV is reaching out to, probably more than others, because I found some things that were not on lists, and maybe it's depending on the series, maybe it's depending on. I can definitely assure you that depending on what you're doing with the TV, it's dynamic in the sense that ports will change. You can run in-map scans throughout the day, and as you're kind of playing around, if you will, on the TV, different apps, different channels, different things will show up. So that's very interesting as well. The 15 services was so far what I found running at the on average, sometimes lower, sometimes more, but rest assured, at any given moment, there's probably quite a few services running, on your TV. But I was just blown away. I mean, not only just the sheer amount of queries that this thing is making. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Pi-hole, on the graph of the chart on the left, this is all blocked. I tried to capture like some of these you see on the left, but the way I don't know. I couldn't find a way to sort to kind of do that. It's either mixed or not, or in alphabetical order, or blocked or unblocked. So I just took a shot at what is most commonly blocked by default by Pi-hole. So there are a few things that I've manually blocked, and we'll get into a few things later. But by default, there's quite a few things that Pi-hole will block, and so what you're seeing here is this is all block stuff. And again, this was just a query from part of a day, and we're 2,500 entries, like almost 100 pages of of queries that my TV is doing. So I thought that was extremely interesting, kind of alarming, very shocking, just to think of what that's doing. Obviously, it can't pick up. It's not recording my voice. It can't watch me. But I don't think it necessarily has to do those things to get a picture of who you are or your habits and things like that. I think, a lot of companies, larger companies, will pull a source from you from many different places to build a full profile of you. So obviously, whatever my TV habits are just a small part of me. But if that company is also gathering all these other parts from all these different other aggregators and sources, then essentially you can build a profile of a full profile of a person. And for those of you that think that's totally outlandish, I challenge you to watch the 3rd season of Westworld, and you'll be just as terrified as me at the idea of what's possibly going on with collecting data on us. So I start trying to hack my TV, and I don't know if any of you guys know. 10 points to whoever knows who this gentleman is and what movie. You can type it in the chat. No takers. No one seeing Kung Fury. This is Hacker Man. You guys have to YouTube that. It's like a 20-30 minute short film. It's amazing. Anyway, so I thought this would be like this. That is a Nintendo Power Glove. You guys have to. I'm telling you, it's like the best 20 minutes of your life, or 30, whatever. Short film. It's called Kung Fury. Total 80. It's done in. It's brilliant. It's done in a very 80s throwback, kind of way. So very arcade-ish, cartoonish, but it's real life. I don't know. It's hard to even explain what it is, but you have to watch it. Anyway, there's a scene where he's Hacker Man. He hacks all things. He hacks time for the main character. But anyway, so okay, let me just start figuring out well, what else? What can I do? I already ran in-map. I've done a few things already. Nick2, browsing, fuzzing. We'll get into blocking and flooding. So the next thing I wanted to do was start playing around with ports, blocking ports, because I know what they are. I've ran an in-map scan. I can see what ports are running, at least at some given time. So it turns out you block some ports, certain things stop working, which it's probably expected, but nonetheless, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I could turn this off, and sure enough, that thing doesn't work anymore. And so I played around with that for a while. That was pretty fun. And then I was like, all right, well, I got all this DNS information, and essentially I'm running almost like my own DNS server. I could blacklist anything I want whenever I want. So let's just start playing around with that. Well, sure enough, now all of a sudden I can't watch TV on it anymore. All my channels go away. I mean, I'll still get some information. Huge Bob Ross channel. There's like a marathon that's like 24/7 that I have access to, which is I usually leave on. It's pretty soothing in kind of a time that we live in right now. Highly recommend if you don't know who he is. I'm kind of saying my age here, but anyway, so yeah, start blocking stuff stops working. So that's pretty cool, pretty interesting. There was one specific address that may be different for everyone or different for different Samsung. There was an AWS address that I thought was pretty interesting. When I started looking all this stuff up, turns out there's one address that I can block that pretty much disables my entire TV. If I block a specific DNS request, the TV will turn on. This is what I will see, no matter what I do to it. This is it. This is as far as it goes. So I thought that was all right. That's pretty cool. I could, turn some things off, disable certain things. That's pretty fun. I don't know. It was just kind of fun to kind of play around with. Again, I'm not like going too crazy with this. I'm not physically altering it. I'm not like I'm not doing this thing at 110%. I'm just kind of like, all right, I'm pretty sure the CIA, doesn't have access to my TV, but while I'm here, what can I find out about it? What can I do? And so yeah, it turns out you start blocking some stuff, things stop working, which I thought is still, as simple as it is. I thought it was, pretty cool. So the next thing I do is I run, Derb. Again, some of these look like web apps. I mean, there's HTTP servers running. Specifically for Netflix on this, it's using Mongoose, a web server I never even really heard of until now. So again, anything with HTTP or anything like over your common ports that you've seen in the past where a web server will run are always usually going to catch my attention. So sure, I run a quick little derb, and sure enough, I get 2 hits. I get a 301 for Favicon, which for those of you who don't know, that's the little icon in the URL tab, if you will, or in the browser, the little icon for it. And then I saw this. I got 200 for this, so that's like a win. Again, the response code 200 is usually like the page, like it's alive. It had a 200 is like a response we typically want in application world. So I'm like, okay, well, this is even more interesting. So I don't know, again, 10 more points. Anyone knows what this game is? I'm sure everybody has to know here. Kind of related to this path here. So I go there. Sure enough, I just go to the port, status okay. Then I thought this was pretty funny. The path I found on Derb, ping, I went there, found Pong. So I'm like, oh, these guys have a sense of humor. And then I thought about it for a little while, and I'm like, status okay, ping, Pong. And I thought maybe this is like a health check. Maybe this is like, those services you can go online, like is this website down? You can go and check. Maybe that's what this is, like the internal version of that. The TV checks this, and if it's okay, then this does this, and if not, then run a diagnostic. Or, maybe because what's even creepier is that my TVs have the option to turn on remote access, so I can allow a Samsung support engineer to log into my TV, and I'm pretty sure they'd probably check some, I don't know, output JSON file or who knows what, or maybe just go to these endpoints and just see what the statuses are. So I'm like, okay, well, I wonder if that's, what this is all about. What if it's just a check? So I found that if you throw a couple packets at it, maybe while your wife is watching a rom-com, you can put it into a continuous buffer mode, which I thought was freaking hilarious. My wife was pissed. I was literally crying, laughing so hard because it took her a minute to figure out what was going on. On the right-hand side is a flutter that I wrote. I mean, this thing is whizzing by. This is just a screenshot of it kind of kicking off. And she walks over and, smacks her beside the head. And I'm just like, I have tears in my eyes because I wasn't expecting this to work, for one thing. And I just wasn't expecting the outcome of firing this off and a few thousand packets later, seeing this thing start buffering and stay there until I let up. So I thought, yeah, so that's I essentially ran a denial of service attack on my own TV. And so yeah, so that's basically as far as I got. And again, there's a lot more that I'm sure I could do. I'm sure other people may have done. But I just wanted to share that one, just bring awareness to what your TV is probably doing, what it's capable of doing, without you even suspecting. And again, I would think would be naive to think that it's just Samsung. So essentially, some final thoughts. I mean, obviously, there's some issues on privacy. Another 10 points to anyone that knows what this over here on the right hand side, what this scene is from, what movie. So privacy, obviously, again, I think that many of us may not be aware of what your TVs are capable of and what they're doing. I would say that it's probably not just your TV. I think any smart device is using a platform that is built to gather data and analytics. And yes, that is Willy Wonka. No, on the right hand side, actually, it's from the ending scene, credit scenes of the original Poltergeist. When their house has been imploded into whatever realm, and they end up getting a hotel, and then the last scene is he pushes the TV out. Anyway, so which would be pretty smart if the TV had sucked in your kids and caused the implosion of your home. So anyway, great movie. There's an original. Oh yeah, I see a trick question. Or was that a trick question? Was I asking a trick question? I don't know. Or do you have a trick question? People that listen to this later on are like, what is this dude talking about? So yeah, so I think that all smart devices are going to have the ability, right? I mean, they're gonna if it's already making a connection and already performing some task, it's like, why not? Like, it only takes one more step to just start pulling all this data and then selling it, because why not? We're already here. I might as well make extra money off of this thing, of whatever this thing is. I mean, your refrigerator, your toaster, all these things are going to be, if not already, well, I know some of these things already are kind of alive, and it kind of begs the question of, which we'll get into the tip of the iceberg of what can be done for these things, of before we get into being weaponized. But like, again, going back to building a profile of a person, if my refrigerator's smart, it knows what I eat, it knows what I buy, what I keep in it, and I'm sure insurance companies would love that. And who's to say that it, I don't know, Samsung can't like lock me out of my fridge, or my toaster doesn't toast my toast anymore because I don't know, I didn't my subscription ran out or something. Like, there's just a lot of things that, I don't know, a lot of rabbit holes you can go down. And speaking of weaponizing, obviously, like, the first thing I'm thinking of is, I want to shell this thing, and how do I know, how do I know that whoever is manufacturing these things hasn't already put some rootkit or backdoor, or how do I know my TV's not part of a botnet? And for all I know, I don't know, Cloudflare just went down because of my TV, or millions of people's TVs are attacking them. You never know. Ransomware, Char brought up, I was kind of picking his brain while I was kind of running through this exercise, and ransomware is an awesome thing. I think people would actually pay a ransomware if their TV. If I could do this, I would definitely like ransomware people's TVs and just charge like $20, $50. I think you don't want to go too high, because then they would just buy a new TV, and you don't want to go too low, but for them to take you seriously. I feel like, I don't know, $50. I'd pay if somebody well, I wouldn't, but I feel like the average person, if their TV was like hijacked and it was basically like locked on a screen. I mean, if you take this far enough, I would be. I don't think I would be too surprised for you to find some way to get ransomware or manipulate the home screen or anything like that. I just didn't have the time or the bandwidth to kind of go that far. But I think for what I've done in a very quick period of time, this goes to show you that of how accessible and how easy it is to maybe manipulate a smart device, and in this case, a TV. But I mean, everyone has a TV. Everyone has multiple TVs. So there would be a perfect undercover botnet. No one would ever think their TV's, bringing down some site, or no one would ever think to, like, who's ever going to attack? Who was ever going to hold my TV, ransom? But I think if you did, I think a lot of people would pay $50 or whatever just to get their TV back on. I think some people might cherish their TV more than their own laptop. Again, the average person, probably the average American, probably watches more TV than they really care about spending time on a computer. We're maybe a different demographic, but I think the average person spends more time on their TV. So I think to them that would be just the equivalent of us having our computer having some sort of ransomware attack. Mitigations, obviously, the easiest one is don't plug it into the internet. And if it is wireless only, as I found that it is a little difficult, I literally have to put in static addresses to stop them from trying to connect. I mean, there's no way to turn it off. It's either you pick one or the other, and if LAN doesn't work, it puts you in this weird loop where it forces you to keep putting in some sort of network setting. So I don't know. It's really weird. It's just either terrible UI or maybe it's done that way on purpose. I don't know, but yeah. So I would say put in static addresses, or again, say you do have it physically plugged in. Maybe you're using Apple TV, and that's where you get all your media from. So the Wi-Fi maybe cuts off. I still took the extra precaution to just put in some random address anyway, just so I know that it won't ever resolve anywhere. And again, obviously firewalls, Pi-hole is amazing. There's a lot of things you can do with that. Super, super easy to set up. I mean, a Raspberry Pi, an old 3 that you can get is like $35, more than enough to run Pi-hole on. Obviously, you can spend a little bit more on the 4 and get different variants of RAM. But I have mine running on an older Pi 3 that only has 1 gig of RAM. And it's been running for, I don't know, years. I rarely ever turn it off ever. And that's a champ. So obviously, if you have any other types of firewalls, if you probably have your basic cable modem router combo from your ISP, there's not much you can do there. But there are a lot of things you can do for free or for super cheap to block or at least log. I'm more inclined to block now that I kind of see everything that it's doing. But thankfully, I do have at least a basic system to kind of log some of this stuff. There are ways you can kind of kick that up a notch and log more details about that, different firewalls, different applications. But at least with just a basic setup of Pi-hole and running some Nmap scans. Again, Pi-hole's free. You just got to pay for a Raspberry Pi. Nmap free. So there's a few things you can do to at least just kind of start that ball rolling. And that's pretty much it. Again, I kind of wanted to keep this short. And again, just more of bringing awareness to everything and just show that with not much effort, you'd be surprised at how you can manipulate your smart TV. So I just wanted to share my experience and just how I got here and kind of my thoughts, and what I found.